Hey everybody, welcome back to Imagine Spotlights. I hope you're having an awesome time at Imagine Camp. We're here today on behalf of the ADA and Beyond Type 1 Collab to continue this fantastic interview series every week all throughout Imagine Camp. We're chatting with awesome and inspiring people living with diabetes. They're going to be sharing their insights and experiences, tips and tricks, and help show us all what it means to live beyond our diagnoses and how important it is to get connected and find community with others affected by this disease. And that's especially important today because we're going to be telling an incredible story. We're chatting with Pietro Marsala, my guest here today. He is one of the first commercial pilots allowed to fly with type 1 diabetes. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Pietro. Welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Pietro Marsala. As Rob mentioned, I am the first type 1 diabetic pilot certified to fly for an airline here in the United States.
And, you know, like right off the bat, we talk a lot about living beyond, and we talk a lot about, you know, don't let someone dictate what you can or can't do with type 1 diabetes. But, you know, up until recently, like you said, you're the first commercially certified pilot with type 1 diabetes in the United States. And that was a huge victory because previously people with diabetes weren't allowed to become pilots.
Yeah, it was definitely a long road, but happy that we've finally broke through and got what we worked so hard for.
And it was a long road. We're going to talk a lot about that journey today. But I think, as usual, the best way to introduce yourself at Diabetes Camp is to talk about your diabetes journey. So why don't you tell us about your type 1 diagnosis and what you remember about that time?
Sure. I was 21 years old. I'm 30 now. I was 21 years old and I was diagnosed with diabetes. And actually, I was misdiagnosed. Initially, they diagnosed me with type 2 diabetes. I was in the doctor's office. I remember having the classic symptoms, losing about 10 to 15 pounds in the span of 7 days. So obviously I knew something was off. I was drinking a lot of water, having to use the bathroom a lot. And so I asked my mom if she would, take me to my primary care physician to get it checked out. The primary care physician looked at me and said, these are symptoms of diabetes. Do you have diabetes that runs in your family? And my mom explained that my grandparents did have type 2 diabetes in their older age. And so they said, okay, well, we're going to run some blood tests and figure out what's going on. And they came back and said, this is type 2 diabetes, and that you would have to start on insulin immediately. And of course, as a 21-year-old, you're very confused. My understanding of diabetes was, people get it in their older age, sometimes not folks in their early 20s. I knew nothing about diabetes. I didn't even know there was two types, to be honest with you. And so I obviously knew that could affect my career. I was in the middle of my commercial flight training at the time to become a commercial pilot, and I had to stop immediately because insulin was the disqualifying drug. And so we had to stop, take 6 months, and stabilize before I can return to flying. Well, I returned to flying about 6 months after that. I proved my stabilization. I got off the insulin and I was on metformin. And so they had me on oral medication for the next about 2-3 months. And then I started seeing my numbers rise a little bit. And so I went and asked my mom, when she said, let's go get a second opinion, let's go see an endocrinologist. And that's where I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And my dreams were crushed right there, to say the least. It was a very hard day. I would say that day was harder for me than the initial type 2 diabetes diagnosis, because I knew that what that would do to my career. The insulin was a disqualifying drug. And as I was educated by my endocrinologist at the time, he said that type 1s need insulin. And so I knew what that meant for my career, and it was just a crushing moment.
No, and thank you for sharing that. I think, many of us remember that day of diagnosis as like a big, kind of traumatic moment that we, get delivered that news. And like you said, and it's true for me as well, I know it's probably true for many campers, I didn't know very much about diabetes when I was diagnosed. I didn't know that there are multiple types. I didn't know that, how the medication worked, and certainly didn't know how it would affect the rest of my life from a career standpoint. But I remember for me, the first thing that I, wanted to know, the biggest question on my mind was, could I play basketball? Could I do the thing that I love to do with diabetes? And for me, the answer was yes. But for you, I want to talk a little bit about your dream of flying and becoming a pilot. Like, that's not just something you decide to do. There's a long path that takes you, flight school and, obviously just like putting in your time and your hours. And not only at the beginning, like the misdiagnosis, but then to discover like months later that, you were a type 1 diabetic and that you were going to have to live on exogenous insulin for the rest of your life. And that was a disqualifier. Talk a little bit about what that was like emotionally and how that sort of was a roadblock in your journey to being a pilot.
Yeah, so I had always dreamed of being a pilot as a kid. I mean, I know most kids, they have this dream of becoming something when they're young, and mine was, aviation and to fly for the airlines, specifically. And so when I was a kid, my parents got me a Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I was 10 years old, and so I would be flying on that, for hours a day, and I'd set it on autopilot, go to sleep on the couch in the office, and wake up when I'm in Europe, and I would hand fly it into Italy or wherever I was flying. And so I began that passion as a young boy, and I began to develop that passion as a young boy, and just traveling back and forth to my parents' native country of Italy as a child, just being around airplanes. I grew up in Chicago, and so being around a busy airport like we have there, and seeing all the international flights come in, it kind of just sparked my interest from a young age. When I was 18, I was finishing high school, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't think I was honestly smart enough to be a pilot. My counselor was like, "What do you want to do next year?" And I was just a little bit lost. I hadn't decided for sure that that's what I wanted to do. I knew I had interest, but again, I didn't know if I was smart enough to do it. And so I went to check out a local flight school here in Phoenix, and I fell in love immediately. I knew that's where I wanted to be, and that's what I wanted to do. So I started training at 18. And obviously, like I said, at 21 years old, being diagnosed and having your dreams crushed, not expecting, I thought of a lot of challenges that could come my way at 18, taking this on financially and at such a young age to take on such a big challenge. But I never expected my health to come in and kind of derail my dreams there. It was definitely crushing. I mean, I think crushing is an understatement, but while you're watching your peers and everybody go through and succeed and kind of pass you, and you just kind of stay stuck, and it's something that you couldn't even control. It was something that I had obviously no control over, that diagnosis, and nothing that I did personally to myself. And that was hard for me to overcome at 21 years old. I thought that it was something that maybe I did to develop this. And so later in life, obviously as we educate ourselves and learn more about the disease, we realize that wasn't the case. I got back on my horse about 2 years later. I decided, I was well, 6 months after the diagnosis of the initial type 1 diabetes, I had to go back on insulin, stabilize, and then I got certified to hold what's called a third-class medical certificate. And so these medical certificates that we carry as pilots, not only do we carry pilot certificates, but we carry medical certificates, and that medical certificate determines of how high we can take our skills, in other words, in our certificates. So our commercial pilot certificate can only be, those privileges can only be exercised if we carry what's called a first-class medical certificate in an airline sense. And so they pulled that from me, and I was only able to hold a third class when I needed a first, just to give you perspective. And so I could do very few things on a third class medical. One of the things I could do is become a flight instructor. And so I decided I would finish my training, and that was always the goal. I needed to become a flight instructor. I wanted to use it as a stepping stone in my career to build my flight experience. This way I can transition to an airline one day. And that's what I would say probably 75% of us pilots do to transition to an airline, is build time as a flight instructor. And so I decided I was going to do it anyway. At least I can make money flying. Maybe it's not the airlines, maybe it's not being a commercial airline pilot like I dreamed of, but at least I could help others pursue their dreams. And so I decided to go back and I'd finish out my training, and I did. And about 2 years after I became a flight instructor, I realized, there's really no difference between myself flying with a student pilot who has zero to little time in their logbook and flying with another professional in an airline setting. And so I decided I was going to do something about it. I was going to use my flight instruction job as a path to pursue my dream. And I knew it was going to be a huge challenge. And I had done my homework at the time, and I realized that nobody had really gotten through. The FAA on their website had stated that they would start approving insulin treated diabetics on a case-to-case basis, but come to find out, they had not approved anybody at that time. This was back in 2016. And so I decided I would take a trip to Washington, D.C., and I was just touring around as a tourist and came across the FAA's building, honestly. And I was dressed in a t-shirt and shorts, and with an ex-girlfriend at the time. And And so she goes, why don't you go in there and see if Dr. Duvall, who's the deputy air surgeon for the FAA, would talk to you. And I was like, there's no way. I mean, look at me. First of all, I don't have an appointment. Like, I'm not ready for this. You know, I knew I wanted to do it eventually, but she's like, we're in DC. Why don't you give it a shot? And so she encouraged me to do it. And that's what I did. I walked into the FAA's building. There's the Department of Transportation on one side and the Federal Aviation Administration on the other. And it's very intimidating. And so you walk in, there's kind of like a TSA security checkpoint, so to speak. And I walk in there and I asked the security guard, I said, hi, is Dr. Duvall here? And he looks at me and says, who? And so he goes, there's a lot of people in this building. You're going to have an appointment to get upstairs. I said, okay, thanks for your time. And so I walked out. And I just decided, you know, I'm going to fire off an email to him. I had his email. I know who he was. And I thought to myself, you know, I'm going to fire off an email and try my luck. And before you know it, about 2 hours later, I'm sitting at dinner in Washington, D.C., and I get an email back. I basically sent him an email and just said, hey, this is my name. I'm a flight instructor out of Phoenix. And they had tracked me, the FAA, for, 3-4 years now after being diagnosed. And I had that third class medical. So they knew who I was, but they didn't know, put a face to it. And so anyway, he emailed me back and said, hey, great. I'd love to meet you. How about tomorrow at 12? So I was like, done. So I got myself some clothes and went up there the next day. And he made about an hour and a half of his time. Or I'm sorry, he gave me about an hour and a half of his time. And so we sat in a conference room and I just basically explained myself and how I felt that what I'm doing right now, flying with people who, with all due respect to student pilots, as we all were at some point, no, they don't know how to fly. And if something were to happen to me, that's actually even a more dangerous situation, because they don't know how to fly. And so my point was, and my argument was, is that I think flying in an airline setting would be a much safer option for us. Not that flying as a flight instructor is dangerous by any means, if you can control your diabetes. And I had proof of that. And so I brought a bunch of my Dexcom clarity reports to him and was just kind of showing him and introducing him to continuous glucose monitoring. And from there, we just kept in touch. I had his desk line, and over the following, almost 4 years after that point, I met him in June 2016. And it wasn't until April 2020 until I became certified. And so long story short, I kept in touch with him over the years and just kind of sent him information in the blind. And I went a step further actually and created this Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that basically showed my numbers in flight to back my clarity data, to show not just when I'm not flying, but also when I am flying, what I do to manage it. And so I made this Microsoft Excel spreadsheet very simple. And I just said, prior to takeoff, what my blood sugar was, 1 hour in a flight, 2 hours in a flight, and prior to landing, what my blood sugar was. And then the notes section, I put in there if I injected any insulin at the time to manage and keep myself in a safe, healthy range, or if I ingested any carbohydrates during the flight to keep myself in that safe, healthy range. And so I was just kind of sending them this data into the blind and hoping that, they would buy it and they would see that it is something that is safe. We're so lucky to live in the day and age that we do. Like, as much as when I do camps for these kids here at the Arizona chapter, I tell them, as much as we wish we obviously didn't have diabetes, I think that applies to all of us. But with that being said, we are so lucky to live in a day and age where this technology is at our disposal. If we're lucky and if we're fortunate enough to have it, this technology is a game changer. And like, not just for myself and my career, but, obviously for our everyday health, as we all know. We're lucky to live in a day and age that we do with diabetes, for sure. So that's kind of how I got to where I got to. I know, sorry to kind of ramble on there, but
no, what a great story, man. Like you're doing my job for me. I love it. I want to go back to like your first meeting, because I obviously you're like, things are happening for you. You're in DC, you're at the right place, you get a response, you're able to get the meeting that you wanted in, but you hadn't had time to prepare for it. It's not like you were, preparing for this meeting for months. What do you remember about that first meeting, kind of explaining your thought process and introducing, the chief medical of the FAA to Dexcom clarity reports and CGM and talking about life with diabetes? What do you remember about that first conversation that helped you get to where you are today?
With the doctor in DC?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So walking in there, obviously I was nervous. And, especially when somebody starts with, they don't have too much time for you, you kind of feel, you feel pressed a little bit. But he was very generous. Like I said, he gave me an hour and a half of his time. And I think it really opened his eyes to CGM because these physicians and these surgeons that are up there, they're surgeons, but they're not specialists in any particular thing, right? They just kind of overall oversee all the medical stuff. And so diabetes, while they obviously are educated in diabetes, they don't know maybe as much as an endocrinologist or as familiar with continuous glucose monitoring. And so I was just educating him a little bit on how continuous glucose monitor works, the alerts and the alarms, and how, before I get low, what I see, how I'm alerted. And so that obviously was an interest to them, because this could be preventable. And their whole thing was, we need to make sure that you can eliminate hypoglycemia. And so their concern was, we need to make sure that we're not getting hypoglycemic in flight. And so I was able to prove that with data, that there are no times that I'm hypoglycemic in flight at all. And so using that data, I was able to, build my case, so to speak. My point was that this wasn't just about me, and this is not just about me. And I think that's kind of why we're here today. And it's bigger than that. It's about every kid living with type 1 diabetes for me. And I explained that to him, that I don't want this certification from just myself. Obviously I want to pursue my dream, but I want this to be bigger than that. I want there to be a change in protocol, so that every kid can have the chance and have the ability to prove themselves like I did. And I don't want it to be a blanket no just because somebody takes insulin. That shouldn't be a disqualifying factor. They should be able to prove themselves. And granted, they take the well-controlled, right? We don't want, obviously, people out there that are, constantly hypoglycemic flying airplanes. We want people who are going to be safe and have it under control to fly the general public around. And I absolutely agreed with that statement. And so, we kind of just went back and forth and kind of just bounced ideas off each other. And we told each other that we would keep close contact. And I even invited him out to Phoenix, where I live. And I said, if you want to sit in the back of my airplane, I would pay for your ticket to come out and sit in the back of my plane so you can watch me live. And so he kind of chuckled at that. And, we didn't do that, but we did have conversations about once a month for the next 4 years. It was an outstanding relationship, a professional relationship I have have with him. And so having him believe in the project and see the data wasn't an easy task, but he certainly, I felt from the beginning that this gentleman I was working with, this doctor, really believed in this, and he saw that this could absolutely be done. And I was happy to be their guinea pig.
That's incredible, man. And I think just a great example of the power of advocating for yourself, because it took a lot of courage. And you mentioned that your ex-girlfriend at the time, like a caregiver, a care partner, somebody who was, not living with diabetes, but concerned about your life with it, encouraging you to go across that line. And I think whether it's advocating at a job or for yourself with a doctor or an endocrinologist or primary care physician, or, in a public space, pursuing a dream, like learning to advocate for yourself takes courage. It also takes community. But when you find that right person and they're able to listen and you're able to see kind of the lights come on for them, like you said, the doctor believed in the project, and he believed in that because of you advocating for yourself and showing, the history and the clarity reports, and like showing that you can get through a flight without a hypoglycemic incident, and it is safe for people with diabetes under the right circumstances to fly an aircraft. That's pretty powerful, man. When you look back, like, what a journey.
Yeah, it was quite the journey. It was when I got that certification, it certainly was the best day of my life to this day. Just all the emotions just came out of me, of all those 8 years of since the original diagnosis, and then the back and forth, the ups and downs throughout that we all live with type 1 that you can relate to as well. Not only was I, like I said, diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, but my dreams and my career were taken away from me by something I had no control over. And so all those emotions just came out of me. In fact, I was driving at the time when I knew we were getting close, because in Halloween 2019, the media released an article that the FAA was going to be changing their protocol. And so I called the doctor up and confirmed that. And he says, yes, I believe it was November 7th. It was going to be registered in the Federal Registry. So the rules were officially going to be changed November 7th. It wasn't until, a few months later in April 2020 that I got my initial certification for it. In fact, I was driving and I was with my girlfriend, and she says, pull over to the side of the road, because I was so excited. I got 2 emails from the FAA, and I looked on my watch and I saw it. And I was so excited. I was driving. I had to pull over, and so I pull over to the side of the road and open the email up, and I just immediately just all the emotions just came out of me. I was just crying, and I didn't even give myself a chance to celebrate. I immediately called the doctor, and I just wanted to thank him, still crying. And so, I called Dr. Duvall up, and I just thanked him for this opportunity and trusting me and believing in me and the effect that this is going to have on so many lives, and not just mine. And I just thanked him for it. And he said, I just want you to know that you are the first insulin treated diabetic pilot that is certified with you are the first email I sent out with your certification. So congratulations on your hard work. And you know, he said, if I didn't shed a tear when I sent this out, I'd be lying to you. So that was obviously a big moment for me to see that it wasn't just me playing this part. It was, you know, there was others that played their part in this too, and believed in this. And so that meant a lot to me.
Well, man, you know, you and I have only met today, or, you know, I followed you on social media for a while, and you know, we've chatted back and forth a few times. But I think it was November 7th. So my good friend Jeremy Robertson is a pilot in Australia. He used to be a commercial pilot before he was diagnosed with diabetes at age 30, and you know, and subsequently got his class 1 medical revoked, and was a flight instructor for a number of years. So very similar paths, very connected to the type 1 pilots world. And he has become one of my great friends that diabetes has introduced me to. And so I remember I saw the notice, or, you know, I saw the news on my little Google alerts for, you know, people with diabetes doing things. And I was like, hey, we got to get on the podcast and talk about this. And I remember just hearing how excited he was that there was a precedent set for in the United States, which the FAA, often other countries will take their cues from the FAA because of, you know, our leadership position. And he said, it just makes me really excited that there's going to be pilots with type 1 diabetes who have just been flying their hobby aircraft, or, you know, running skydive flights for people, you know, with their class 3 medical, and, you know, that they're going to have a chance potentially to get their wings back. And you could feel that emotion in his voice. And, you know, something I'd love for you to talk about is, you're not the only type 1 pilot, right? You're the first commercial class 1 medical pilot, and that is incredible. But the type 1 pilot community, while small, is also very connected and, you know, very close. Like, what were those conversations like with your friends with type 1 who are also, you know, hobby aircraft pilots? And, you know, what were those like for you guys? Like, just kind of being able to share that journey with them.
Yeah, it was huge. Immediately, we were all connected. We had been connected about a year before the initial certification. Someone who has type 1 diabetes, it was also a pilot, started a Facebook group, and we were kind of just all connected in there, and just kind of filling each other in now that it was starting to gain some traction. And so we all kind of just stayed connected and you know, talking to each other. I had close contact with Jeremy, like your friend in Australia there. I met him through I believe it was social media too that introduced me to Jeremy, who then introduced me to so many others here. I knew there were other pilots. I just didn't know. I met another one that lived in Denver. I think you've done a podcast with him, John Roth. Yeah,
Yep.
he's actually, John and I are very close friends now, and him and I keep in touch bi-weekly or so. And so yeah, no, it just opened up the world to all these other individuals who are dealing with the same situation. And we all obviously understood that this could be done safely. We just all wanted the chance to prove ourselves. And so, you know, when that article was released by the media, and it obviously changed our lives, we had this email going on in this Facebook group, and we were all chatting back and forth and just talking about how excited we were that this is not just going to be, you know, one person being certified. This is for everybody, and here's our chance. And we were just all thankful for that chance. We had no idea what the bar was going to be set to. We had no idea what the parameters were going to be. I told Dr. Duvall, I said, you set the bar and I'm going to jump. I'll get there. Whatever that bar is, I'm going to get there. You tell me where I need to be. And they could have set it as hard as they want, as easy as they want. And I feel like what they set was very realistic. And so, yeah, the emotions just were incredibly high for all of us. We all just were so excited about this project. And in fact, today there's now type 1 diabetic pilots out there flying for the airlines, currently flying passengers around, which is just an incredible victory for all of us. It just feels like such a relief, a weight off our chest. Those that are flying currently, an individual that flies for Southwest Airlines, who I also know, he got his certification back and immediately returned to training and is back on what we call the line flying. And so he's back now flying in the skies, flying passengers around, and so far so good. And I expect nothing else from that. I mean, he's doing great, and he's just proof right now that this can be done and will be done safely. Absolutely. You know, for myself and some of the others, the certification kind of came at a weird time with the pandemic, with air travel dropping to its lowest lows in years. I mean, the day I got certified, the TSA screened, I believe it was 84,000 people that day in the United States, the day I got my medical. And today we're screening over 2 million consistently. And so that's, we've come a long way. And in fact, now a lot of us have airline interviews set up. I've got one next Wednesday in Dallas. And so I'm super excited about that. And I know that a few others have airline jobs now lined up because we're starting to push through this pandemic. So this is just, to say I'm excited about it is quite the understatement. I'm so pumped for everybody, and to have this opportunity now. We're just so excited to be able to do this.
It's so cool, man. And like you said, I think it's just the beginning, and I'm so excited to hear that there are, pilots with diabetes getting their wings back, because I know, for you, obviously, like it was on your journey to becoming a pilot, but there are many who, lost their wings after they had already kind of lived their dream of becoming a pilot. People like Jeremy, who were flying and then got diabetes later in their lives, and were forced to kind of choose a new life path. And to be able to say, hey, no, you can go back and do what you always love to do, and that's an option for you still, is super impactful. For our campers, I think one of the coolest things about diabetes camp is that everybody lives with diabetes, and we all know, what goes into like a day-to-day, interaction. You mentioned having to explain clarity reports and CGM and Dexcom to Dr. Duval. Talk about the tools that you use today, like when you're getting, in the cockpit, and how do you manage your blood sugars while you're in the air, and what do you carry with you, and kind of what's in your go bag, so to speak?
Sure. Yeah. So in my flight bag, I carry glucose tabs when necessary. But for myself, I try to eat a little bit lower carb, especially before I fly, so I don't have to take as much insulin. And so I see the most stable numbers for myself are actually in flight, just because I'm either A, fasting, or B, I'm eating low carb after lunch or whatnot. And so I carry glucose tabs with me. I have, mini Cliff bars, kind of like Kind bars, nut bars and stuff of that nature. And I drink just water for myself. But I know some other pilots do some other stuff to snack in flight. And so that's how I manage in flight. I mean, I usually within a 2-hour flight, I really don't need much. But when necessary, I do have my snacks with me at all times to manage my diabetes for sure. I'm sorry, what was the rest of your question? I forgot that.
No, I think that's part of it. Like, and do you operate with like an insulin pump or with multiple daily injections? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm on MDIs, still multiple daily injections. I'm considering a pump. I didn't want to really switch anything up. When I was going through my certification with, I wanted to keep everything the same just for the sake of ease there for certification purposes. But yeah, no, I do daily injections, and I'm on Dexcom. I use a G6, and that was how I was able to prove, like I said, what I did. And I use my clarity reports, and every month I print out my clarity reports and have to send them off to the FAA, and so they see what we're doing 24/7. And I'm totally okay with that. Obviously, they want to make sure that we're going to be safe, not just in flight, but outside of flight as well. And I agree with that. And so that's how we're able to prove ourselves. We use our clarity reports. It's a life changer. It really is. That data that it could provide is literally what changed this rule. Because without that, people were pricking their fingers, as we know, 5, 10 times a day, 15 times a day, whatever you could do. And that doesn't give you a full picture, as we all know. Filling in those gaps is really what the FAA wanted to see, to prove that you weren't just, stable at, in the morning when you wake up and at night before you go to sleep. It was all that data filled in between was really what changed the regulation here. So yeah, that's what we use daily to make sure that we stay safe and we fly safe. And like I said, that Microsoft Excel spreadsheet as well.
Well, and I was going to ask, like, how do you integrate into your pre-flight checklist? Like, how does your checking your CGM or checking your sugars, like during, how does that impact, and talking with your co-pilot or your your students while you're doing flight instruction? How is that a part of your routine now?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, in that Excel spreadsheet, I have where I'm at, my numbers where I'm at prior to takeoff, an hour in a flight, 2 hours in flight, and before landing. And so while that's what's being recorded there, I'm obviously looking at my blood sugar more frequently than once an hour, just to make sure I'm constantly staying stable there. For myself, they want us, the range is set with the FAA. They want us between like 80 and 180. In flight, I don't like to keep myself any higher than 150, and any lower than 100 is where I like to stay, in that 50-point range. And that's ideally where I like to be. And so I do everything in my power to manage myself between those 50 points. And so, yeah, getting ready, like I said, how I eat when I fly and how I eat when I not fly are a little different, just because, the amount of insulin that needs to be taken, for the flight. I try to minimize the insulin intake, and so to keep my blood sugars extra stable. So diabetes is secondary in that sense, where I'm more focused on my job. And it's just become part of my scan, really. We like, just like as pilots, we scan our instruments. Scanning my Dexcom, my G6 is part of, part of my scan. Every I would say I probably look at my numbers probably once every 15 to 20 minutes, depending on what I've got going on, and how critical of a phase of a flight we're in. Is kind of how I like to do it. And yeah, it's been great. I've never have had any episodes of hypoglycemia in flight. Like I said, my numbers are most stable in flight, and so that's where I pay the most attention to it and stay closest to it. So that's just part of my routine now. It's part of my everyday life. It's part of my scan in the airplane, and that's just how I manage it. Without the CGM, I don't think this could be done safely. Honestly, with the CGM, this is just a game changer.
That's awesome, man. And just hearing your story is inspiring to me, and I know our campers are getting a lot out of it. I do want to ask you, this is a huge accomplishment, a huge goal. Like you said, you were working, having a call every month, like working every day for 4 years to try to make this dream happen for yourself. What's next for you, man? Like, what's what's a big goal that you have on the wall, and what's the big thing that Pietro is going to tackle next?
Well, like I said, I have that interview in Dallas next week. I was hired by a company in Charlotte, North Carolina, back last summer during the pandemic, and so I thought I was going to the airlines then. But as we all know, air travel dropped quite a bit, and so that kind of threw a wrench in the plans again and delayed us about another year or so. So if this interview in Dallas goes well on the 7th, next Wednesday, I'll know the day of, and then class should be starting for me in the fall for training. And so we go through about 90 days of training or so. After we get our job, or after we pass the interview and then go through the process, we have to go and go through about 90 days worth of airline training between class work and simulators and stuff before we actually get out and fly the airplane. So that's kind of on the agenda for the rest of the year. And I just want to continue advocating for diabetes and working with the youth. And so that's always been my goal. And my dream is on my days off, dedicate volunteer my time to organizations like the JDRF and do camps and events like that, and have these phone calls with you all who are also changing lives every day. And I appreciate what you guys do for this community as well. I want to do more of that and dedicate more of my time off to working specifically with kids with type 1. Going through this as an adult was hard. I can't imagine as a kid going to a birthday party and having to either A, refuse cake and pizza, or B, choose cake and pizza and deal with the ramifications to follow. And just, I can't imagine going what they go through on a daily basis. Sometimes I think my life is hard. I give these kids and their parents so much more credit. Living with type 1, I've listened to parents, speak to me on the phone and on Instagram and on Facebook and reach out to me and saying that they haven't had, sleep in months and all these things that go through a parent with type 1. I wish I would have given them a little more credit there, but they definitely deserve a lot of that because they are the superheroes in this all. They definitely follow those kids closely.
And we are grateful for you spending our time with us today with the ADA and Beyond Type 1 collab and coming to Imagine Camp and being here for our Imagine Spotlights. I do have one question for you before we go, though, because
Sure.
I'm sure there are a lot of kids here today who maybe for the first time realizing that being a pilot might be something that they are interested in, or it's something that's possible for them. So what's your best advice for somebody who's watching this right now who might want to be a pilot when they grow up?
My advice is just listen to your parents. Definitely listen to them. They do know best. Listen to them. Listen to your medical professionals. They will guide you in the right direction. And this is something that I'm so excited for all of you for, because we can use this as an incentive. Whether this be, I hope my story just reaches these kids with type 1, whether that be to inspire you all to become pilots or not. I want you to use this story as an example that you don't have to give up on your dreams, and whatever that is in your life, whether that, like I said, that's become a pilot or not. Don't let this stop you from pursuing your dreams, because you absolutely can do it, and it doesn't have to stop you. The only thing that could stop you is yourself. So I encourage you guys to all continue taking care of your health and take it seriously from the beginning. And if aviation is the path that you wish to pursue, then it starts now. And not to put pressure on you guys, while it's important to watch our health closely, it's also important to enjoy our childhood and be kids. And so don't let that put too much pressure on you, but know that this option is there for you later in life, and use this as an incentive, like I said, to take care of your health and listen to your medical professionals. I'm looking forward to hearing more stories and more success stories with these kids with diabetes, and I'm trying to follow the community closely to hope hopefully inspire more and work closely with them. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, I've had many people reach out, many parents reach out. My Instagram handle is flytype1. If anybody want to reach out to me, feel free to reach out, and I would help. I'd be more than willing to speak to you or your parents about, maybe guiding you in the right direction when it comes to either aviation or not. If I can be of any help, I would love to be any help that I can be for you guys.
Well, we certainly are thankful for you being open and having those conversations with campers or with parents. And I couldn't agree more. Making sure that you do all the little things to take care of your diabetes is going to open up tons of possibilities for you down the road. I do have a goal for you though. If you know me, obviously, like I like to make light of diabetes sometimes. So I need to see on social media at some point a picture of you flying a G6 airplane, wearing a G6 on your arm. G6 in the G6. That's what I'm speaking into existence for you, man. So
sounds good.
I love it.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have to definitely post a picture. I think when the G7 comes out, it'll be approved for the arm, so I'll be able to do more of that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, Pietro, man, thank you again for your time. We will include your links to your social media in these posts. And thank you all campers for tuning in and being here today. We hope you're enjoying Imagine Camp, and stay tuned for more Imagine Spotlights. I know we've got some great guests still to come. We're here every week as part of the ADA and Beyond Type 1 collab. I'm your host with the most insulin on board, Rob Howe. Thanks so much for joining us, Pietro.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate the time. Good luck to everybody.